Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Slovenia heads to the polls in a tightly contested parliamentary election that could reshape its political direction and impact the European Union. The race pits Prime Minister Robert Golob's liberal freedom movement against Janez Janša's right-wing populists, with polls suggesting very little difference between the two and coalition politics might be inevitable. Now, joining us today on the TVP World to unpack what's at stake is Dejan Valentinčič, president of the Slovenian World Congress, bringing global Slovenian perspectives into this discussion. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening from Slovenia, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. Now, this election is being portrayed, largely described as pivotal. Can you help us understand what is at stake here?
Yes, Slovenian society has long been considered deeply divided, and this has only intensified in recent years. So both major political parties and their coalition have emphasized the importance of this election. On one hand, such statements are, of course, typical in campaigns as a rhetoric used to mobilize voters. But on the other hand, of course, the level of division between the two political options is indeed very high, which makes this election important in determining Slovenia's future about its strategic directions.
Right now, before going into the election, before the exit polls started showing the Golob's party pulling ahead, it does seem like they're running very close. Now, you talked about division earlier. Just how deeply divided is the Slovenian society heading into this?
Well, I would say that there are very different views on the past, the current situation, and also which should be the way for the future. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I would say quite divided.
All right. Now, the polling does show the two-party running pretty close until the current exit poll also shows a little bit of difference there. What do you think contributes to the Golob's party pulling ahead?
Well, this is important because it wasn't really expected. The Slovenian Democratic Party was supposed to win this election, but a lot has happened in the last week. So apparently, many voters changed their minds. But it's also importantly and very interesting that along the two dominant parties, there were several parties that were promoting cooperation and dialogue, yet they performed poorly, worse than pre-election polls had predicted. So this suggests that a major of voters identify with one of the two camps and is happy with such a polarized landscape.
Right, that's actually very interesting. Like you mentioned, a lot of the smaller party that focuses on dialogue, coming together, working together, actually didn't seem to do as well as the polling would suggest. It's actually the polarizing rhetoric that is gaining speed and gaining ground within Slovenia. What do you think explains this surge of these sort of politics in the country?
Well, you know, in the past, we had quite a different situation between two options, because the right wing, the conservative position, they had a very strong leader who people or like very much or dislike. There is no neutral feelings towards him. This is Janez Janša, who's been in politics for 35 years. On the other hand, the left parties have changed their leaders, even parties on every elections. But now the Prime Minister Robert Golob has showed to be similar to Janša in this aspect, so to be a strong personality where many left-wing voters identify with him. So they are two dominant figures in Slovenian politics currently.
All right, so do you believe this is a more race about a personality who's running on the ballot, or how much do you think that has an effect as opposed to the politics that they're running on?
Yes, and even not just so running on favor of two personalities, but also voting against one of the two main leaders, so who you dislike less for many voters, and that was very decisive, as it shows now.
Right, so there's also the phenomenon of perhaps people trying to vote for the lesser of two evils there as well. Now, you also mentioned there was a little bit of surprise. There's something unexpected there, which is the roles of allegation of foreign interference. How much did that play into this election cycle?
Well, apparently it played quite a significant role. Interestingly, although the recordings that were shown in the last 2 weeks clearly suggested large-scale corruption in Slovenian society, something that has led governments to collapse in other countries, this issue was not so important for voters apparently, but what appears to have a greater impact was the claim that possibly these recordings may have been made by a private company from Israel, from another country. So far, no evidence has been presented to support this, but and even if this was true, there were multiple competing theories about why and on whose order this might have happened. We most probably will never know the whole story, but still, to see how the favors of voters changed in the last week or two, it shows that this played a great role, whereas the corruption issues not that big.
Right, that's actually quite interesting. If, like what you mentioned is true, the corruption issue is actually putting on the wayside in favor of focusing the attention on the potential interference. We also know that usually in these election cycle, economic pressure is also something that really dominates every cycle. Do you think that that has a role to play in this election as well? Or do you observe the same phenomenon where it's largely put to the wayside in favor of personality politics?
I would say that it played less role than expected because the last 4 years have been rocky regarding Slovenian economics. The government that was in power for the last 4 years was in constant battle with the business sector. And despite all these years of protests of entrepreneurs, and despite also that in the last months, the statistics showed that Slovenia is being overtaken by Croatia in certain indicators, which is interesting because Croatia was always less developed. And also in the last couple of days, there's a big shortage of gasoline in Slovenia, so we have long queues at gas stations. This actually didn't show to be a big factor because if it were, then of course the governing parties would do worse. But still, the party that put most of its program on the economic issues was Nova Slovenia, which turned out to be the third party with 9%. So I would say that people who are concerned in the economic issues supported that party, apparently.
Right. Now, we've seen a surge in populist politics in Slovenia right now. Do you have any theories behind why that is?
Well, I would say that in today's context, but not only in Slovenia, but globally, the concept of populism is evolving significantly. Social media has become a key factor in shaping voters' decision, while also traditional media is increasingly unable to serve as a credible source and interpreter of information. And of course, as a result, most politicians are, to some extent, compelled to adopt some populist strategies in order to remain visible. Also in Slovenia, of course, we could say that all main parties have some populist aspects, but I would hesitate to say that maybe Slovenian Democratic Party, which is usually considered to be more populistic, that is actually more populistic than the freedom movement, because also the president of the freedom movement, of course, is known to frequently change his statements, even to lie and afterwards deny this. So I would say we are part of this global shape of global politics that are very much populist.
Right, so perhaps it's a trend rather than an isolated incident. Now, there's also, of course, other topics that's potentially on the ballot. We have issues such as cultural identity, and including just also difference in diaspora voices. What do you think are some of the main factors and the main issue that dominates the election cycle? What are the kind of topics that single issue voters might have voted on?
Well, I would say that diaspora is not a big issue here because the number of diaspora votes is just too small to influence the overall result. And also the voting pattern is very similar to the case in Slovenia. About the cultural identity issues, I would say that in this election, it really didn't play an important role. So there were some minor issues regarding the integration of foreign workers, etc. But these really were not the key points in the of any party actually. So I wouldn't say it played an important role.
Right. Last but not least, we do have a little bit of time. Can you help us understand what this outcome would mean for Slovenia's role within the European Union going forward?
Well, I would say that not big changes are supposed to happen because both major camps are predominantly pro-European, so there is very little difference in this regard. But what I would like to stress out is that forming a government will be challenging because neither of two blocs has a clear majority, so there will be very difficult negotiations to be expected, and we cannot say today which government we can expect in Slovenia for the next 4 years. Maybe even Slovenia won't be able to form a new government, and we are heading for a new election in a couple of months.
All right. Of course, the numbers are still rolling out, but would you say that these smaller parties would actually play a decisive role in forming the next government, maybe playing kingmaker?
Oh yes. Certainly, of course, we have at least 3 parties that have around 5%. So our interest limit is 4%. So they will be very small parties. But of course, in order to survive, they will need to be tough in negotiations. And without them, neither of two camps has the majority. So it will be a difficult path in front of the country in the next weeks and months.
All right, so coalition building is going to be a difficult topic going forward. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.